I'm a little bit apprehensive, Thierry, because in the best of circumstances, your questions are quite hard. And now that you've been given free rein to make them even harder, I'm a little bit concerned. This is starting off bad for you, Thierry. I'm going to answer by not answering because I don't think the question is right. It's the wrong premise.
Why do we need greening of streaming? And why you do not get more traction than you thought initially?
When you talk to genuine experts, and this is kind of a, excuse my French, but a no bullshit podcast, so we say things as they are. Sustainability in any area is complex. In streaming, it's particularly complex. There's a lot of opacity to do with commercial secrets and stuff like that. So we have very active members that would love to share some of their data, but they can't.
Can you compare the power dissipation of 1 million iPhone versus a 100 terabit core router inside a telco network?
And there's been this debate in the industry about, we call it the green button versus the gold button debate. So the idea is, should you have a regular service and a green option to make it more environmentally friendly, or should you have a very green thing by default and have the gold button? And so there was lots of debates about this, and I've come to a very, very clear vision. If you ask my advice, it is there's no hesitation in it. Do not go the way of the green button. Of course, the end goal is to arrive with things that actually harm the environment, namely carbon equivalent, so greenhouse gases and things like that, water usage, the use of raw materials. And we would like to get there one day, but we're not going anywhere near there for now because we're focusing on the issue as streaming engineers. And as streaming engineers, we don't really understand carbon, let alone water usage. What we do understand is energy, in particular kilowatt hours. That's why we're focusing on kilowatt hours. There's no such thing as a mistake, there's just learning.
Welcome to the Playback Pioneers, the podcast that brings fresh, unfiltered perspectives from the people shaping the future of playback technology and content experiences. I'm Josh Seeley from 5V Video, and I'll be your host, where we sit down with some of the brightest minds in the industry to talk about how they're pushing the boundaries of what's possible. In each episode, we'll hear from individuals who are pioneering new ways to deliver content, optimize playback experiences, and redefine how audiences engage with media. But what makes this podcast unique is our format. It's a relay-style conversation. Today's guest becomes tomorrow's host, passing the baton and keeping the conversation going. We're not here for the usual polished PR responses or scripted sound bites. We want real, honest conversations that highlights the challenges, innovations, and ideas that are driving the future of playback. In our last episode, we were joined by two incredible leaders in the space, Tommy Flanagan and Thierry Fautier. Tommy asked Thierry whatever he wanted, no pre-vetting, no filter, setting the tone for the kinds of open, dynamic discussions we're aiming for in this series. Now, Thierry takes the baton, where he'll be interviewing Ben Schwarz, president of Greening of Streaming, an organization who has pioneered sustainability initiatives in our industry. In our usual style, Thierry is going to be asking whatever he wants. So sorry, Ben, we're not sure what will come up, but no doubt it will be an interesting conversation. Thierry, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Josh. Well, first, let me introduce again myself, Thierry Fautier, Managing Director of your Media Transformation Consulting Company. And yes, I've been grilled in the first episode by my friend and sometime boss, Tommy Flanagan. And now happy to pass the baton to my other friend, Ben Schwarz. So our last host, Tommy, had a burning question, and I'm going to phrase it. The curve seems to be flattened and interest has dropped off in energy saving. What initiatives and campaigns do you think can bring it back on the agenda for CFOs? So Ben, let me first ask you to introduce yourself quickly, since we have lots of topics.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having me, Josh, and I'm a little bit apprehensive, Thierry, because in the best of circumstances, your questions are quite hard. And now that you've been given free rein to make them even harder, I'm a little bit concerned. My name's Ben Schwarz, and indeed, I've taken over the reins of Greening of Streaming. It's a great honor. I've been involved with the organization for just over 2 years, and I took over in mid-December, so it's only been 2 months. And it's a huge challenge, and I think I don't need to talk about it now because it's part of what this podcast is about. But so, yeah, a few words about myself. I live in Paris. I'm originally British, French too now, and I've been an independent consultant for the last 18 years or so. Before that, I worked at Orange in the IPTV area where we met Thierry. And before that, I was a software engineer in internet startups, and before that, business software. So that's my history. And yeah, I've been involved in the TV side of things for just over almost 25 years now. It's been my main focus. To go to your question, I would actually do one of those this is starting off bad for you, Thierry. I'm going to answer by not answering because I don't think the question is right. It's the wrong premise. The problem is a time scale problem. When we look at sustainability, sort of 20 years ago, there were a few people working on these issues and energy consumption, and there's not much they could do 20 years ago. At best, they could try and get some companies to sort their rubbish, and things like that. There were some very minor things, and things have progressed a huge amount since then. So when we look at our timescales that we live in every day, we get up in the morning and something happens that day and we're frustrated and things. Yeah, in those days, weeks, even a few months timescale, we are in a small downtrend at the moment. There's been your elections you had in America, the European elections last year. A lot of green progressive parties lost a lot of ground. So the agenda has changed, the tone has changed. But so the idea is, if you started 20 years ago, we've been going up like this, since then. Right now we're in a downtrend, but when I was quite concerned about this and feeling a bit depressed about 7 or 8 months ago. So I took my pen out and wrote an article on this, and I called it the hype cycle, the sustainability hype cycle. And I interviewed some of these long-term experts that have really been working on nothing else but sustainability for 20 plus years. And they don't feel concerned that much. They say, yes, short term, we've lost a bit of ground. And I certainly feel it in Greening of Streaming. When I joined Greening of Streaming 2 years ago, and I tried to get a few interviews with people or meetings, they'd immediately open their door, whereas now they say, yeah, I'd like to speak to you, call my secretary and we'll set something up next month, kind of thing. So yeah, there is a short-term deprioritization, but I don't think it's that significant. Sorry, that was a long answer, Thierry, to your question.
Perfect. No, that's a good one. So maybe to set the stage, Ben and I met, of course, 20 years ago when we were doing IPTV together. And at that time, I still remember Ben was explaining me, IPTV, I'm not sure it's going to last. And after in 2014, he started to say, no, we are going to close all IPTV, everything is going to migrate to unicast, multicast is going to die. So 10 years after, Ben, I'm sad to say that IPTV is first the number one network on the planet. And second, multicast is going to switch to unicast, but it's going to take maybe another 10 years. So that's the side conversation. More interesting, Ben, you have been outstanding Ultra HD Forum working group leader for communication. I was the president at that time. And tell me, what's the journey for you to move from a position where you have to report to somebody to a position where everybody has to report to you?
Oh, that's a tough one. You didn't give me any advance warning. Well, I think I'm a deeply democratic person at heart, and I believe in consensus. And I believe that a successful leader doesn't actually have to pull rank. I've only been in charge for 2 months, as I said. So far, I haven't had to. And I would count it as a failure every time I have to pull rank and say, guys, you have to do it because I say so. I've never said I had to, and I hope I never will. And if I do, I hope it won't be more than once or twice in my tenure leading Greening of Streaming. It's very much what we're in at the moment is an industry member-driven organization. I'll tell you a bit about the organization. So for me, the critical aspect is to get members involved and particular working group leads. And so I want to do whatever it takes to get them empowered and involved. And giving orders probably isn't my style, and I don't think it would work that well. So, and talking about I think this should be music to your ears, Thierry, because all the time I worked with you in the Ultra HD Forum, I don't remember once. I mean, you were technically my boss, but I don't remember once you telling me, Ben, you've got to do that because I said so.
Okay,
You always managed to convince me that it was important to do it, and I did it because I wanted to.
Yeah, this is the spirit of non-profit organization where we work in a collaborative way and not a hierarchical way. Of course, we need to bring everybody on board, especially if we do teamwork. So that was, I think, for me, a very quick learning. So let's move now to the heart of the conversation. I will have two questions for you. Why, and you have to be shorter in your answer if we want to go through all my questions. Why do we need greening of streaming? And why you do not get more traction than you thought initially?
Why we need greening of streaming? Well, because when we started 4 years ago, basically there was a void in the streaming industry, that there were a few people that kind of were thinking vaguely about it, but there was nowhere for people to coalesce and to have these discussions. Greening of streaming started out and still is very much an engineering, sort of video engineering organization. We are beginning to worry a bit more about marketing and messaging aspects because we understand our members need that too. So we needed somewhere for industry people to work together on this, because one of the big lessons you learn when you get involved in any sustainability, I think in any industry, is that it's not a race that you can win. Nobody can be best at sustainability in streaming. It can only happen if all parts of the ecosystem collaborate. So it's a collaborative thing, and there has to be somewhere where people can meet in a non-profit area to collaborate. So I think the reason for being is still very much there. Our occasional frustration at the difficulty in growing membership. We're not that far off our target membership. I don't think greening of streaming would be very successful if we were sort of, SVTA size or things like that with several hundred members. We don't need that. We probably need to be about double the size we are, and then we'd have enough resources to carry out the work we do. So in our sort of strategic thinking, we'd like to have about 50 active members. Currently, we have 26. So part of the reason in the second question is that we had a honeymoon period when the founder, Dom Robinson, sort of started going to trade shows and talking about this. Everybody clapped and was really enthusiastic because, we were starting, and we had that honeymoon for about 2 plus years. And then there is some frustration that we have published some significant findings already, but for 4 years there aren't that many. There are, as I say, significant ones, but and the reason is that when you talk to genuine experts, and this is kind of a, excuse my French, but a no bullshit podcast, so we say things as they are. Sustainability in any area is complex. In streaming, it's particularly complex. There's a lot of opacity to do with commercial secrets and stuff like that. So we have very active members that would love to share some of their data, but they can't, because if you're looking at CDN data and you have, DAZN as one customer and Orange is another customer or whatever, and you give us raw data, we might be able to actually understand who is doing what and using what technology, and this is some of the secret sauce of streamers. So sometimes it's commercial, sometimes it's just the data is not accessible. The way the cloud was built originally, people didn't think that energy would be an issue, so that they've got kind of carbon calculators and stuff. There is some data you can get, but it doesn't really work at the moment. So we're working at the two edges of the streaming ecosystem. We've kind of fixed that in the sense we've got live real-world energy coming from live encoding, live real-world energy coming from consumer premises equipment, so from routers and TVs and set-top boxes. So those things, the easy, low-hanging fruit, we've already done, and we're still working on the middle bit.
Okay. So to enlighten our audience, I would like you to explain in few words, like speed dating sign. I'm going to throw the names: attributional versus consequential data, CO2 versus kilowatt metrics, and other relevant terminology you think the audience needs to know?
Okay, so attributional versus consequential is a very impactful concept that people should understand when they want to get to grips with anything to do with sustainability. The idea, put simply, I'll start with a little paradigm typical of the attributional world. So, say I'm an eco-conscious person, and I'm about to go and meet you in your home in California, Thierry, and I arrive at the airport, and I realize, there's a bus that gets me really close. Shall I take the bus and be good to the planet, or shall I be lazy and take an Uber? And so the Uber would be, I don't know, 500 grams of CO2, whatever, because you live quite far from the airport. Whereas the bus would be 30 grams of CO2. So if you think about that bus, whether I take it or not, do I attribute the 30 grams if I do take it, or not attribute it if I go as far as walking? Well, the bus actually leaves every hour, whether I take it or not. And so my weight, my 80 plus kilos, in a several tens of tons vehicle wouldn't make much difference. And that would be an attributional way of measuring things. There's no consequence to it. Whether I take the bus or not has no consequence. So that's one simple way of looking at it. Perhaps more useful is, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Attributional analysis is really important. You have to start somewhere, and it has the great advantage of being much simpler to think of the world that way. When you're working consequentially, you work from bottom up. So what we're doing in our streaming measurements is we are actually putting a watt meter behind every device in the stream and measuring the real world energy, and then building up the model from the bottom, rather than trying to say that's the overall thing and let's attribute. And one of the big downsides of the attributional way of thinking is that it's kind of led us to a world where it's kind of more of a blame game than anything useful. We say that, say there's a figure in the industry saying that an hour of streaming is 55 grams of CO2. So how much is the responsibility of the encoding company? How much is the responsibility of the of this company or that? Well, that again can be useful. It's better than nothing, but we've seen over the last couple of years it hasn't actually made us progress much. So that was attributional. Then you said some other ideas. When you're talking about the sustainability of streaming, so its environmental impact, of course, the end goal is to arrive with things that actually harm the environment, namely carbon equivalent, so greenhouse gases and things like that, water usage, the use of raw materials. And we would like to get there one day, but we're not going anywhere near there for now, because we're focusing on the issue as streaming engineers. And as streaming engineers, we don't really understand carbon, let alone water usage. What we do understand is energy, in particular kilowatt hours. That's why we're focusing on kilowatt hours. We're not saying that's the end all and be all. We are going to stay with kilowatt hours until we've got our end-to-end vision. We are working with academics, in particular University of Bristol, but a few others. And our idea is once we have readily flowing data in kilowatt hours, we will ask them to turn that into more useful things to build a complete picture of environmental impact. So that's carbon versus kilowatts. We're on kilowatts just because we have to start somewhere that we can manage. Then just a few other concepts that I think, as you just handed over to me to give some concepts, one other that I think is quite important, and we're working on that now, trying to progress that with some guidance from someone you know well, Ian Nock, who's an electrical engineer by training, is that you work out that when you actually measure the kilowatts that go into a device, it's not as simple as that. So if the device is telling you it's reading 8 kilowatts in standby and 100 kilowatts and things, actually there's something called a power factor. And what that means is the energy coming into a device is measurably different from the energy being consumed inside it. So look at it from really simplistic, without Ian explained how it actually works. I couldn't explain it again, but the power is coming into the device, and literally sometimes up to 40%, 40% of that power bounces back off. So in a very sophisticated energy network, it's reused, but in most cases, it's burnt.
Okay.
So that's something we're working on. So just to say that the importance is, where do you measure? If we measure the power coming into devices, we don't get the same results, up to several tens of percentage difference from measuring the power used inside devices. So that's another way of calling that is A side, B side, and the power factor issue. I could go on, Thierry, but you told me to shorten it.
Short, yes. No, it was not short, but now I have to stop you. So one picture I love on Twitter is a bunch of Tesla being recharged out of diesel generators. This is the worst that can happen. Okay, so there was a ADEME report, which is the French agency taking care of sustainability, and you helped me quite a lot to understand this report, trying to figure out what is the split between data center, CDN, network, device, TV, in terms of contribution. So can you give us your perspective of where do we stand today in either modeling or measuring, and do we have a good idea of the contribution?
So just a preamble to that is, greening of streaming doesn't yet have its own pie chart where we can divide what goes to there. I hope we'll have one this year, our first version. But I'm not even promising that, because it really is, we want to build it from the ground up by real world measurements, and it's quite complicated. But to just a multifaceted question, but to start just with the actual facts of the ADEME ARCEP report, an ARCOM report. So the latest one has significantly different data from the previous two. So in 2020, I think, and 2022, ADEME produced two different reports which basically had the same distribution. So you had 80% of the energy used went to home devices, namely the home gateway and the screens, whether that be laptops, PCs, or mobile phones and TVs. That would be 80%, and then they had 15% for data centers and just 5% for the distribution network. And then they produced their report just a few months ago, the latest version, at the very end of 2024, and that pie chart was very different. So they had 80 to 90% for the terminal devices, so all that goes on in people's homes, and they had between 1 and 5% for the data centers, which is very significantly different from the 15. 1 to 3% was the data center, and the network was also much more variable. It went from 6 to 20%, or that I don't remember whether it's 20 something. And so at first I thought, oh my God, how can this be? There must be some mistake. And there was maybe they could have communicated better, but it does actually make sense when you go and listen. And so if you read really carefully the whole of all three reports, you realize that the first two reports actually used generic ICT, any kind of electronic services in that, particularly for the impact of data centers. And the last one, with those very significantly different data, only focuses on video delivery or streaming, also audio streaming and video streaming. Mm-hmm. And what they say is that when you look at how much work a data center needs to do, depending on the service, it's a bit counterintuitive, but in the video case, it's actually proportionally much less. That the data center's job in video isn't that big in terms of energy. Yeah, there's a big hard disk, there can be a lot of content there, but that doesn't use up much energy. There isn't that much processing relative to the whole end-to-end stream, end-to-end service, compared to other services that might be delivered through a data center, including gaming or other things like that. So that's where that came from, Thierry, those differences.
So now I'm going to ask you a lighter question. I put my weapon down. Can you compare the power dissipation of 1 million iPhone versus a 100 terabit core router inside a telco network?
Well, if you'd given me the homework with those precise figures, I could have actually come up with some figures for you. I could have tried to, at least. What I can do, though, is so I can't, I'm afraid, Thierry, answer that with precision, but I can give you some key criteria that one would use to work on that. So typically, when we're thinking about such a question, I think probably one of the most important things would be the shelf life. So how long devices life, because we'll see in a minute, I'll tell you how much of the total carbon impact comes from running the device.
Mm-hmm.
And so a typical iPhone lasts between 2 and 4 years. It can, obviously, some people have 6-7-year-olds. I'm quite proud. I work in sustainability, so I have an iPhone from 2020. So I'm beyond the usual things. So I'd say 2 to 4 plus years, whereas a operated, sorry for the word, device would typically last at least 5 years. So the minimum lifespan of a network router is longer than the longest lifespan of a mobile phone. And in normal usage, it would go up to 10 years, this network equipment. And there are occasional circumstances where you have even older equipment. So that's the first thing before we go any further. Then there's the manufacturing impact. So strangely, these devices for a single device are actually much more complex to make. The routers don't have that need to absolutely crush everything down. They don't have a screen. Screen technology makes it so those together make that the manufacturing impact will be much more significant for a mobile phone. Mobile phones are, and you said iPhone, so if you're staying with an iPhone has one of the worst repairability indexes. Even when you send stuff back to Apple when something's not working, they usually change it. I've had iPhones before, and often I've got a completely new iPhone back from the eye care center. Or if there's a small issue with a part, they'll just change all of it. Whereas on a large network router, they are upgradable, much more recyclable. So that's the upgradability. Then you were talking about typical power draw. So again, I know offhand the sort of yearly consumption. One of these devices would be 2 to 5 kilowatt hours per year. That's the typical thing. And I knew you were going to ask this question, so I did do some maths. And a network router, large scale one for operator telco grade router, is typically 1,000 times more energy in a year, assuming 24/7 usage. So it's a factor 1,000 in the power.
But still, I have my million users, so they are going to consume 10 times, 1,000 times more.
Yeah, so per user, it's 1,000 times less. In all, it's 1,000 times more. As is the factor
that's
1 million.
That's I think what people need to remember is that because we have a lot of device, the power is going to be quite high. And then we don't talk about the 65-inch HDR 1000 nits TV, because this one is even more complicated conversation. Okay.
I haven't quite finished. There's just a few more data points on comparing a smartphone with a network router. So quickly, end of life recycling. Typically, one of these devices gets about 20% of its components can be easily reused. Theoretically, we have more, but in reality, it's closer to that. Whereas network routers, they often they are refurbished and given a second life, which phones are much less. It's only just starting. And just to compare the carbon footprint, cradle to grave, it's estimated about 50 kilos. That's data that's floating around the industry, as we'll see. Whether that's the right figure or not, I don't know. But in the same kind of calculation, would say about 1 to 5 tons for a router in its lifespan. And just one really important aspect to understand, to close off this, is that the energy, the carbon generated in the life of one of these devices is only 15% of the carbon comes from its usage. All the rest is building it and getting rid of it. Okay, so that's 85% of the carbon is not linked to how you use it, whereas a typical network router would be over 50% of its carbon comes from its usage.
And this is available today in your greenhouse streaming repository, or is it still a work in progress?
We don't have a publication directly on that, but it is on our to-do list. We do have a bunch of publications around that, but not that particular slant that I just gave you.
Okay, so my favorite topic, the myth of reducing the bitrate on the encoder side. What is the impact on the power consumption across the food chain?
Okay, so let's start at the end because we actually did some measurements there. I have some real data. We run hackathons at Greening of Streaming. We call them hackathons. My son said to me, but Dad, you don't give out prizes and there's no software to develop, so you can't call them hackathons. I said, what we do in our hackathons is we get together around a call between 3, 12, 15 of us, and we work together for about 2 to 3 hours, taking measures in parallel. So I'll start at the end, start at the TVs. We were very surprised to see with a bunch of 4K TVs, recent TVs, not the absolute latest, but sort of 1-year-old models. We did it on 3 different TVs, and they all were very small but measurable uptick when the 4K TV gets sent an HD stream. So a 4K TV in its default settings, when it gets an HD stream, will upscale it. And that's not free. So one device is going to use maybe an extra watt hour. But if you've got 10 million devices, well, that's 10 million watt hours. So it is measurable on a thing. So that's the first element. There is a teeny weeny uptick. So we're talking of moving from 100 watts to 101 watts. So if you've got 100 watts for a 4K screen, exactly the same. We did it with a totally identical stream, but just a lower resolution. So that's one thing to note. It's not, as I say, it's not a major impact, 1 watt or 1% in the case of many TVs. Now, the really tough part of that question is the network, because here's the problem, is that it seems intuitive that if I want to be green, whether I'm an operator sending content out or a consumer pulling content from the web, the less data I take, the better it should be for the planet. And that would make sense, sort of, and intuitively. The reality is it's a little bit like my bus analogy before. The network works a little bit like public transport, that there's buses going from one place to another at all times, and either you get on the buses or you don't. It's not quite that simple. There is an impact for content, but it is barely measurable. That's what we've seen so far. So that when we see a huge peak in usage, we see a very small little uptick in energy.
Yeah. But, Ben, you know the argument we have on this subject. When nobody consumes at night on the mobile network, you could easily switch off base station because nobody is streaming Netflix at 2 a.m. in the morning, especially if he sleeps in his home. He's probably going to do that on Wi-Fi.
True. But that's true only of mobile networks.
Yes.
Fixed networks don't tend to do that.
No.
And so just to finish on that, what makes it complicated to understand these concepts is that, so there is an impact between usage and power, but it is small, very small on fixed networks and quite small on mobile networks. It's not at all relational. It doesn't go down to zero if there's no zero usage. The network has to be there. It has to be able to know that you might need it. It has to be ready in case you need it. And so that's to do with the other concept, which is capacity. It's capacity that really drives. There's a much more linear relationship between energy and capacity than there is between energy and usage. And so it goes back. So at the end of the day, if everybody in a given market, all users, were to become more green and aware and limit their usage altogether, that would have impacts to the capacity planning of the networks. And these are typically multi-year things. So, the people in the telcos at the moment are already planning the usage that we'll have in 2028 or something like that. That's where they are in their planning. But if they see that actually it's coming down a bit, they will start planning for smaller networks. So there's 2 ways this goes. One is the actual capacity of the networks, and the other is we do expect the technology in networks to become a little bit more sensitive to usage changes. At the moment, as I say, it's very unsensitive. So going back to that 4K HD example, in today's networks, there's almost no difference. We are hopeful that as we move forward, networks will become better at that.
And then we have also this argument where I say, well, but if I can save you 50% of the traffic, then you don't need to buy new equipment to expand the network. And you tell me with your colleagues, but whatever you say, there will be a network equipment upgrade because it has to be more efficient, less rack space, less power. So this is a very interesting conversation, Ben, and I suggest we move to the next topic.
Sure.
If sustainability is so important, do we see operators today making it mandatory in their RFPs? And the next question is, has Greening or Streaming published an RFP template for members and non-members to be ready for the next RFP?
You're jumping the gun as usual. You're always in advance, Thierry, because that's a key project I personally am working on right now, and we haven't published anything. We've just started the work, and our friends at Bouygues Telecom have promised to help us with that, and so I'm still waiting their input. But I did think about this in advance, and there is quite a lot happening. So, for example, there was a publication by BT in the UK recently that when they manage their RFPs, in some of them, sustainability accounts for up to 30% of their evaluation criteria. So that's
very
a
nice
piece of
very
information
nice.
Published on the web. I know that that's the case for Bouygues Telecom, for Orange, for a lot of the big operators that I'm very familiar with. That's BT was the only one where I had that number, which I thought might be useful. Then there's some governments have been more proactive than others. So the Australian government, for example, has published on one of their websites some templates that they expect people to use, to talk about things like content, recycling content. And so this was a 2019 action plan by the Australian government, which you could look at. And there's another talking point on that from the Next Gen Mobile Networks, the NGMN organization. They've also published some information on ESG, on telling their members that they have to put advising them to have specific ESG sections in their scoring mechanisms, and they explain that a little bit. So there's some early stuff happening in the industry, and you kind of jumped the gun, because at Greening and Streaming we will be formalizing all of that in a working group and putting out some recommendations, but we haven't actually got to that deliverable yet.
I have been always ahead of my time, Ben. That's not the first time. So to follow up on this, and maybe a quick answer, because I don't think there will be many names, which streaming operator are today communicating on the green aspect of its service to the public?
I don't think that there's any proactive communications on that, to the best of my knowledge.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a free advice, since you were the king of the service tracker in Ultra HD Forum.
Yeah, I should
please start a greening tracker who is going to track down official numbers provided by operators on their own service. Could be a Netflix, could be an Amazon.
Yep.
People need that, Ben. When I talk to people about the Ultra HD Forum, they tell me, yes, I know the service tracker. I say, but I didn't finish my sentence.
There is something I can just say on that that's interesting, because we have been thinking a lot about that in Greening of Streaming, and I've been thinking about it before I even joined Greening of Streaming. And there's been this debate in the industry about, we call it the green button versus the gold button debate. So the idea is, should you have a regular service and a green option to make it more environmentally friendly, or should you have a very green thing by default and have the gold button? And so there was lots of debates about this, and I've come to a very, very clear vision. If you ask my advice, it is there's no hesitation in it. Do not go the way of the green button.
Okay,
I think that's a very dangerous pattern. You should have gold buttons.
Yes. So
the reason being, because if you can have a green button, you should have it by default. That's where we're heading. That's where the industry and our societies are going to have to move to handle the green thing. So to say, I could have made it green, but I've made it optional, I don't think that'll hold water in the years to come. So I think it's going to be gold button or nothing.
Okay. My last question. Can you tell us about your key 2025 new initiatives?
Okay. I'll tell you about at least two. I can't think which because I've got lots, but two come up to mind most. So there's a project that we communicated on officially just at the end of last year, which is really a core project at the center of everything we do. We call it REM, for remote energy measurement. And that is a platform we've put together. We use humans, not robots, to do our dashboarding and data aggregation. And so it's real-time end-to-end measurement. And I told you a little bit about it, so we've kind of fixed the two extremes of it. Well, that's up and running, the live encoding and the consumption part. And I'm very excited that with one of our new members, Arkiva, we are setting up some caching servers that are being donated by Akamai. So we are going to have... So basically there's four parts of the measurement. There's the encoding part, then the caching part, and then the distribution part and the consumption part. So you can split a network up. We have a network diagram that has 40 different devices you go through between the origin, but this is just four big areas. So the encoding part, the CDN part, and the distribution part, and the consumption part. So we've got the consumption and we've got the two extremes, and over the next few weeks, I'm quite hopeful we will have the CDN, a version of the CDN up and running. And we've got ongoing discussions with advanced discussions with three different ISPs to get some live measurement from the distribution part. I'm hopeful that we might get that this year. That might not be till next year because it's a very complex issue to address. But so that's the REM project. So this live energy measurement platform is something we want to bring more to the market and to show people, have other people use it and things like that. So we're working very much on that. And then in parallel, you could say, well, Ben, that's not that ecological. You're creating new devices and you're trying to solve streaming's environmental footprint by buying lots of new devices. And yes, okay. So one thing we are working on a lot too, and we hope to be assisted by the IETF or another such organization because it's more of a standards issue, is as we speak today, Thierry, there is no technically accepted way of talking to a device in a network, whether it's an encoder, whether it's a router, whatever it is, and saying, hey, Mr. Device that's connected to my network, how much power are you using right now? Could you please tell me?
Mm-hmm.
That is not possible today. And so we're trying to fix that at a network level, at the low-level protocols, by creating a protocol. And there's a green working group at the IETF that are already working on something like that. So we're trying to bring our specific streaming requirements to that work and join them rather than reinvent the wheel. So that we're calling that project eYang for now. It's a technical name because it's a Yang model, but it will give it a more if we maintain any kind of ownership of the project, we'll give it a more useful name as we move forward.
Perfect. I think, Ben, we have reached our time limit, and I know Josh is ready to throw other curveball to both you and I.
First of all, chaps, that was great. Sustainability, the kind of carbon footprint within the streaming industry has been a huge topic of conversation with my clients globally. So to learn a bit more of that from you two has been great for me, as I imagine it will be for our viewers, right? So thank you very much for that. I guess, Ben, first of all, you started the conversation a little bit concerned about, giving Thierry the free rein. How did you find it? Was he as hard on you as you thought?
No, he could have been harder. I'm feeling a bit relieved. He was quite gentle on me. Thank you, Thierry.
I missed it. I could have punched harder.
Thierry, you happy with the answers Ben gave back? Anything you feel missing from that? Anything you might want to rip out more?
No, Ben is always too long. But I think what is interesting is I am an outsider of the sustainability because I have a lot on my plate between the scalability of live. By the way, I will be at the Connected TV World Summit, between the Ultra HD, which is still not finished, between new technology, new codec. I cannot also spend as much time as I want on sustainability, and I'm quite happy that Ben, a good friend of mine, has decided to take on the challenge. So I'm following but I'm not an expert. So I'm asking non-experts questions, of course, with my touch. So for me, it's a great conversation. And I'm also happy that Ben is helping the community to understand what we are talking about. Don't make green button. Don't reduce the size of the file because you believe you are going to save the planet. Doesn't work that way.
Good. Well, I'm glad you two enjoyed it, right? And as Thierry alluded to, we like to have a few kind of lightning questions at the end, a little bit different, get you kind of thinking in different ways and runs over some different topics. So learn a little bit more about you guys, right? And Thierry, you're off the hook with this because we asked you all these questions last week, right? So you can sit back and relax. Spotlight's on Ben. So Ben, what's the best advice you've ever been given? Big question. Take a second if you need to.
Well, it's a really difficult one. I mean, in the professional thing, I've had an amazing, not tutor, what's the word? Coach who helped me. And when I have a big, I've only come to forks in the road. That's no reference to God save me, yes, to Musk. When I come to major forks in the road, sometimes I've only had 2 or 3 in my life where I've actually made a decision for my career. It's normally, I just pulled this string and it's led me to where it's led me. And I had a big decision to make. Do I put a lot of my consulting work aside to focus on greening of streaming? And so I went to see a coach and spent 6 months with him, and I really loved his advice at the end. It was basically, Ben, I've been talking to you for 6 months. I can confirm greening of streaming is what you need. But there's always a but. You need to find a way of making the issue a little bit wider than just the engineering issue of how we get the data, because if you have just that, it'll be hard for you to stay focused and motivated over multiple multi-year projects. So that's one of the things which Thierry didn't ask me any of those questions, but I am trying to bring to greening of streaming a more holistic view to think about what's the next step. Once we start saving energy, then we have to think about regeneration, because we've screwed up the planet so much that even if we stop screwing it up, I mean, we've lost so much biodiversity and biomass. We have to bring some of it back. We're already rolling over the hill. And so what that means for streaming, I do not yet know, but that is my job in 2025.
Wicked. Love the answer. And I almost feel like, Thierry, I don't think I actually do want to let you off the hook with this one, because I don't think I asked you this last time. Best advice ever been given?
Well, I had multiple life. I was working in a research lab in Philips at that time, the early days. And then I moved to California in Silicon Valley. I think probably the best advice is from my wife, who's telling me, don't do that, do this. Why don't you do that? But she has no skin in the game besides looking how much I can bring back home. So I think it's a complex question. And I think you get multiple advice along your career. I think for me, the most impactful training I got was emotional intelligence. Number one by far. Intellectual intelligence, yes, of course. We have a lot of very smart people in France, Nobel Prize in mathematics, but looking at where's France today in AI, okay, number 4, number 5, way behind other countries. So yes, it's important. The academic is important, but I think the mental, I was just reading today on my Twitter feed that all the top CEOs of American company were college dropouts.
It's interesting, right?
They didn't believe in education.
I think, as we go into this world of AI and Gen AI and, people not feeling who they're talking to, right? I think that emotional intelligence is going to become even more prominent and important as time goes on, right? So I very much agree with you, Thierry. Good answers, both of you. That was a big question, and I apologize for dropping such a big question on the both of you on the fly.
Can you have smaller, right? Josh? Can you have smaller?
Yeah, I'll try my best, Thierry, and I'll let you off this one as well because you answered this last time. So I am going spotlight on Ben. Ben, a bit lighter for you, sir. What TV show are you streaming right now?
That British one. Lots of sex in it.
Ah.
On Max. What's it called? It's about a young boy who dies in Italy, sort of 20 years before the action that happens in the present. It's going to come to me in a minute. Anyway, on Max. Do my Canal Plus subscription in France.
Nice. I think everyone, I'm keen to see what the impact Max will have in the UK on launch as well, right? Ahead of that. So, no, that's all good. You might have answered it there, Ben, and I'm going to ask Thierry as well. Go-to streaming platform at the moment?
For me, it's Canal Plus. It hasn't got the best interface, but it has all the best content from Apple TV, and they go round in circles every couple of times a year. They do a deal. At the moment, the deal is with Max, so we're getting access to Max content, but that will be removed. But I pay like less than, I pay $30 a month or something, and I can share my account with one person. I'm allowed 2 simultaneous streams. They don't have all that nonsense about making it really hard to access. My only issue is the owner of Canal Plus is not somebody I approve of that much. You can't win them all.
Fair play. Good answer. I think I asked you that last time, Thierry. Have anything changed in the last few weeks? Streaming platform at the moment?
I have less time. And of course, I'm entertained by Donald Trump executive order on day 1, then on day 2, pause on day 3, a new one on day 4, pause. So this is entertaining me right now.
I just come back from New York City myself, and it was on every screen, everywhere, all the time. So yeah, I feel like I've had a week of that entertainment myself.
Entertainment is the right term. Yeah, it's right term.
Yeah. I definitely asked you this last time, Thierry, so I'm definitely going to leave you off this. Ben, your death row meal.
Well, you do surprise people with your things. They go all over the place.
That's the game, right?
So there'd definitely be aubergine in it or eggplant. I've had vegetarian and even vegan episodes in my life, so I kind of always feel a bit guilty about meat. So I think there wouldn't be meat in it. Maybe the Italian dish where you have eggplants with mozzarella on top, just baked really simply with a few herbs. I think I'd go for that.
Sounds clean and healthy. I like it. Quote you live by.
There's one I used to love, but again, I think that Elon Musk uses it, so I probably will have to find another one. But and nobody knows who to attribute to. Sometimes given to Gandhi, or to Einstein. There's this idea. I can't remember the best wording of it, but there's no such thing as a mistake. There's just learning. But again, that used to be one of the quotes I lived by, and I'm looking for a new one because I don't want to have something that much in common with Elon Musk.
Fair play. And Thierry, I didn't ask you that last time. Got any quotes you live by?
Everything will be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it is not the end.
I love that.
John Lennon.
I love that. Yeah, very famous. Love that quote. Very good, Thierry. Very good. And I think I did ask you this one last time, Thierry, so I'm going to leave you off this. But Ben, as a kind of the final question to you today, sir, do you have a party trick?
Maybe. Just the name of the series from the 2 questions ago just popped back in my head. Disclaimer.
Okay.
Watching. Well, I'm a very keen amateur musician, so when the party is when it's appropriate to the given party, I love bringing out my baroque flute and playing some flute, playing a prelude. If I'm all on my own, I'll just play a little prelude that lasts a minute or 2, and if I've got some musician friends, we'll play together. I did that at my birthday party a few months ago.
Sounds like a good party trick. Love it. Right, thank you. In terms of that with Ben and Thierry, we do really appreciate that. I guess to finish, obviously you mentioned the passing of the baton in terms of the way that we operate here on the Playback Pioneers podcast. Thierry, as you've been our host for this session, what question do you have for our next host that Ben is to ask our next guest?
Who will be the guest?
I don't think we've discovered who that exactly will
You
be
asked
yet.
me a question about a topic I don't know, so
It's to be a generic
I
question.
don't know the answer.
Hold on. We'll cut this bit out, but we'll do that again. I do know the next guest. George just told me, right? So we'll start that question again, Thierry. Thierry, as you've been our host for this session, what question do you want to ask our next host that Ben will ask our next guest? And that is Bluen Le Goffin from Acedo.
Oh, Bluen. I think it's first, I like Bluen. She's a very nice person. And second, I would like to ask her what type of innovation she can bring to the TV ecosystem, AI-based, that will have impact on end users.
Strong. Like it. I look forward to hearing the answer from it, right? Okay, chaps. I think that is all from us today. Really appreciate both your time. I really enjoyed the conversation. I learned a lot personally, as I hope the viewers will as well. Thank you for your creative answers when I put you under the spotlight at the end. And yeah, thank you very much for the conversation, chaps. Wishing you a good evening, okay?
Well, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Ben.
Take care.